Good evening, everyone. Sorry about the technological delay. Tonight I'm going to talk about a 160-metre interference investigation that was undertaken together with Steve Adler, VK5AI, and myself. And I'd like to say a big thanks to Steve for all his support and effort in making all of this happen. Steve will also have a short or talk about one of his experiences towards the end of the presentation. So this interference basically was on 160 metres. It was present in eastern Adelaide, roughly around S7 on my inverted L. It was on air continuously. The harmonics were approximately 80 kilohertz apart, and it has a distinctive 80-second cycle time. The background on the display is not that signal. That's just some random EMC test thing. I thought I'd make it look good. So that's a spectrogram of the signal as seen at my QTH. The signal is there, and then 80 kilohertz up, it's again there. And this structure here is the distinctive pattern it made about every 80 seconds. It would change tempo, and the spectral sort of thing would flip over. The interference, we'd been experiencing it for a while on the 160-metre broadcast on Sunday mornings on 1843 kilohertz. The interference wasn't necessarily always right on top of 1843. Sometimes it would be 5 kilohertz or so higher, but when it was there, it was strong enough at my place to drown out the lower level stations. And then one Sunday, Steve mentioned that he can hear it at his place at Woodford, which is another 2.5 k's to the east of me. And Steve indicated with his loop antenna that it was coming from the west of him. That got me thinking that this is not someone's washing machine next door or something very local to me. It's much more widespread. I broke out my active loop antenna, the larger one I've got, and also found, as shown on this display or this plot, that it was to the west of myself. So I decided to go looking for the source, driving west really down McGill Road, just monitoring the signal on the Codan NGT in the car with the antenna. Not really, it won't tune 160, but it was good enough that you could hear the signal. Basically, I drove around multiple streets to find where the signal location was. And then when I thought I knew approximately where it was coming from, I used a Texan PL 360, which is that little receiver there, to go and hunt close in to find the offending signal. The process of driving around and looking at the levels, I repeated with using the Hermes Light equipment, which is on the bench here. Basically using the Codan NGT antenna, or the 9350 antenna in scan mode, which it's like an active antenna. And then together with a GPS, you put all that data together and you can create a plot like this, like a heat map. And from that map, you can clearly see where the I don't know that this pointer is working, but anyway, you can see the red spot in the middle where the highest levels of signal were. Basically, the interference we tracked to a vet facility on McGill Road. It's an animal vet hospital. And I proved that it was coming from that building just using the Texan. The Texan is quite good because it's actually got a quite linear in dB signal level display on it. And on the lower cable, luckily this power box was outside the building. It showed that it was 55 dB microvolts out on that cable when you held the antenna close to it. There was some additional measurements with the Hermes light and the Codan antenna at that location. You can see that there's much stronger levels of harmonics further close in. And yeah, so see, it was pretty strong at that point. That's reading about 46 dB microvolts, which is S9 plus 10, roughly. So the next steps at this point in time, prepared a report. It's about an 8-page report. It had all those plots and pictures, etc., in it. We submitted that to the ACMA because we weren't 100% sure where we stood in terms of approaching the people that owned the facility. And we submitted that to the ACMA, and after a reasonable period of time, they came back and advised that they expect that amateurs are able to communicate with neighbours and residents and businesses and attempt to resolve the interference caused to or caused by amateur operators. So there's a clear direction there that the first port of call is for us, if we're experiencing these problems or causing problems, is that we really need to sort that out and try and resolve that. They did say, however, that we could come back to the ACMA if the site owners were uncooperative. So we made contact with the business, found who was the responsible person to deal with, got an email address, etc. I sent the report and I sent a copy of the ACMA email late one afternoon, and then got a phone call at 8 a.m. the next morning from the person saying, "Oh, when can you come?" So we arranged to make a mutually convenient time to undertake a site investigation. So some of the tools that we use, the little Texan, which you've already seen. Another one was the Mini SA spectrum analyzer, which are, for those of us who were brought up on HP 141Ts, I think they were, or even worse, pretty amazing that you can get something that covers with ease out to 800 megs, and it's $200 and you can hold it in your hand. Works rather well. The thing attached to it is a H-field loop, which is just a loop of semi-rigid coax with the center conductor soldered back to the outer where the loop bends around. So that was a couple of the tools that we were using when we were hunting this interference at the building. It turned out that it was pretty hot in the building in terms of this interference. We spent quite a while searching all over because it was basically on the mains wiring everywhere in the building. Before we started, though, there was one interesting thing that the facility manager identified to us, and that was that sometimes they'd experienced interference problems with their ultrasound, and medical ultrasounds actually use energy in the HF band of frequencies. So we thought, well, that's kind of interesting. Anyway, yeah, the noise was on power wiring all over the facility. We searched around for the highest level location, and we traced it to a a battery charger that was used on the starting battery for the emergency power generator. That battery charger is just here. So it looks fairly innocuous, but is a bona fide serious noise source, which I'll explain why in a moment. So that's a plot there of or picture of the mini spectrum analyzer with the H-field probe sitting on top of the battery charger. You can see a significant number of harmonics across the band there. And the next one is shown with the main switch is off. The battery charger is still on, or some of the electronics is still on in it, of course, because it's got the battery attached to it. So it's the low voltage side or extra low voltage side is still functional. We'll go back just a step. I've got a video which will add to the challenge now. Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah, that mouse is, the battery's flat. Left or right? Okay, so we can't see the play button. Okay, so there's just the video and we switch it off and you can see dynamically so switch goes off and almost all that interference disappears. And then we turn it back on and it comes back on. Now I'm just got to get that. No. All right, thanks. Does that have context? All right, so that's a zoom in picture of the battery charger. The white sort of stuff it was stuck on the wall with double-sided tape, which was sort of falling off. So it's yeah, interesting. So the important things here is that the battery charger, in terms of product compliance, there's no CTIC or RCM indicating compliance with the ACMA EMC requirements. And it's not registered on that EESS, which is the Electrical Equipment Safety Scheme, because an item like that is a prescribed item which must be registered with the EESS. And you can look that up and it's not on there. The resolution, we advised the facility that the battery charger needed to be changed. Sorry, Jared.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but a question, it had like the little two squares, which would suggest, is it double insulated?
Yes.
It's actually certified as?
But logos are cheap.
Yeah. Yeah. So
people in China know that they've got to have these things on equipment.
Yeah.
Like the CE mark and
Yep. Yeah.
Yes, I know that. It actually originally stood for confuse everyone.
Yeah.
But and before that it was conformity in Europe. But anyway, It's now China export.
China
Anyway,
export. Yeah. Okay. All right then. So it probably doesn't even meet any electrical safety.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
Do they probably realise that if they have a fire or some other incident like
I believe
right.
they do now after we advise them.
their insurer will probably
Yep. So it's sorry.
say sorry, you're not covered because you had a non-compliant item.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, you know, having gone through the mill of UL.
Yep.
Right.
I know it.
Yeah. So yeah, interesting. Thanks. Thank you, Arthur.
Yeah, speak up if anyone's got questions as we go. Just grab the microphone and go with it. Yeah, so there was no indicated compliance of any kind for Australia. We advised facility that they needed to replace it, and they did arrange for the unit to be replaced. They found a locally sourced unit, and funnily enough, we didn't have any more 160 metre interference. That's the locally sourced unit. You buy those at Repco. They're about $60. So what we did ask the facility when they got the unit replaced that they would keep the old one for us to have a look at, which what we've done here is have a look at it. So what happens here is that the power comes in. There is a bridge rectifier. I think it's underneath, and there's the main bulk energy storage cap, and then it's straight into I think it's a 3842 or 45 switching power chip, which runs somewhere in the kilohertz, like 60 kilohertz or something like that. So there is absolutely no EMC filtering whatsoever. And unusual for a product out of China, it doesn't even have the places to put EMC filtering components. Quite often you'll see a board like this will have some extra holes in it where there can be caps to ground and common mode choke, and then they link out the common mode choke and don't put any caps in. But this unit had nothing in it. And even the earth wire is just cut off. You can see it in that right photo. That just a little stub of there's no connection to the mains earth. The one bit of good news is that the actual cord set is actually compliant in Australia and has an electrical safety. It has an electrical safety, so you know the cord set's good. But so yeah.
Repeat the question, Arthur.
Is there any fusing? I'm not sure. I can remember. I don't think there is. Yeah. I mean, that's the least of your problems, really. So the worst thing about this, you can still buy it online from China for half the price of what you can buy the local product. And there's nothing to stop you bringing it into Australia, which is pretty unfortunate. So, as I said before, the vet personnel had indicated that their ultrasound machine had sometimes experienced interference as they use frequencies from a HF band. Because we've got a man on the inside, Ray, wherever you are, Ray does some other work at the vet facility and surprised us by being there when we went to investigate. But Ray reports that they haven't seen any interference on the ultrasound machine since they've replaced that battery charger, which is probably not surprising given how bad the battery charger was. We did actually try while we were there to see whether the ultrasound machine was being interfered with, but we didn't see anything. But the thing to remember is the battery charger, when we were there, was probably just in float mode, idle or float mode. And there would be other times, say when the battery might be somewhat discharged, that it would be working harder and making more noise, etc. So that was a win for both people. Yes.
Hello.
Yep.
Actually, that cord would be non-compliant if it's got three conductors in it because it's a double insulated appliance. So the cord should only be a 2 insulator cord.
Quite possibly. I would have to delve into a standard to confirm that. But you're right. A double insulated device does not need an earth connection, and there shouldn't be a provision for one as such.
Shouldn't have one. Doesn't need one. Shouldn't have one.
Right. Okay. All right. So coming out of this, wanted to just run through some guidelines for undertaking this kind of investigation. Firstly, detail all aspects of the investigation. As said earlier there, we submitted, it was about an 8 or 9 page report to the ACMA, and we kept updating that when we found more information. And I think the final report was about 15 pages because it had everything that's in here, like in terms of identifying the product, its problems and its lack of conformity. Work cooperatively with the other party. No wild accusations, and everything. If you approach with solid evidence and a reasoned argument. Present yourself professionally. I shouldn't need to say it, but put some clean clothes on, have a shower, brush your hair, look respectable. Consult with others as required. There's plenty of people in the amateur community that can help you with these kind of things. And then advise the ACMA of the outcome, particularly where non-compliant equipment is identified, because they need to know that there is a lot of this stuff in the community coming around. Okay, I think that's the end of my presentation. I do have another bit of a demo to do here in terms of the noise that can provide. So I'll just set that up. Yes. Did the ACMA get back to us? Yes, they did. And at the very end, when we said we'd resolved it, and it's the customer or the people, the facility had resolved the issue, they came back to us also indicating that they felt that the case was closed and had been resolved. Another question over the back there.
I did, at the resolution of that case, did the ACMA put a ban on the import of this particular item of equipment?
Sadly, they have no power, I believe. Well, they may be able to point that, they may be able to work with customs, but I suspect there is no easy way of restricting it coming in. As I said, it's available on that website. You can order it and it'll probably be here in a week and a bit. That brings up a really important point that I think we as amateurs really need to try and educate our families, our friends, anybody about don't buy electrical equipment from China, particularly mains powered electrical equipment from China. And as we all know, don't buy batteries. because of the battery fires that are being experienced everywhere. It's a matter of educating people that, yes, that charger is only $30 from China, but the one from Repco that replaced it is 60. But what's it going to save you if it burns your house down? So I think that's something that we can do as amateurs, is try and spread that word far and wide to advise people not to be buying electric equipment from China unless they can prove that it's compliant, but it's very hard to do that on a website like that.
One question, Peter from the Clare Valley, Peter VK7PN. I know there's a lot of fires, I'm in CFS and we're aware of this, with e-bike chargers. Now we've got Kent Worswo on here, who's from Riesling Trail Bike Hire in the Clare Valley. We have a number of sophisticated e-bikes which use the approved chargers, but often people don't. They use a dodgy charger like he's talking about, and that's where a lot of the fires come in, I think. Go ahead.
Yeah, certainly there is the problem. The chargers are not necessarily compliant, but then also I think sometimes the chargers are mismatched to the battery, and you have those kind of issues as well. But it's certainly, again, people think they're saving a few dollars up front by buying something cheap from China, but in the long term can cause them a lot of problems.
Had an opportunity to look at some e-bikes a while back, and the battery box was hooked to the bike. A nice heavy-duty plug. It was an IEC type plug with just a little extra dimple in, which didn't stop like the kids plugging in a standard IEC computer lead straight into the battery. The thing would have gone bang if that had happened. So I can imagine that could have happened too. So.
Yep. Well, that was an AC connector on a battery.
On a battery, yes. It was actually slightly modified to produce a so-called like polarizer, but it didn't. You could easily have pushed in a standard IC.
Yeah, well, clearly that is absurd and ultimately very dangerous, because it will resolve itself in a dangerous situation very quickly.
Exactly. Yes.
Any more questions? All right. Yeah.
Arthur,
Hello,
Paul.
Paul.
Just a quick one. Surely there must be some insurance ramifications of bringing this equipment into Australia and using it.
Absolutely.
And therefore, these people that have fires, e-scooters, or fires in their house resulting from either the use of a wrong charger or wrong battery, surely that goes back to the supplier. In the case of batteries, of course, suppliers in Australia, in the case of the chargers, not sure, but surely there must be a way of advising the public via the press, maybe using insurance companies, to actually say these units are capable of burning down your house, and if you use them with the knowledge of that, then you're not insured.
Yep. Well, certainly there needs to be a stronger education program. Unfortunately, the lure of spending less money still holds significant sway. Less money up front. But yes, you're correct. I mean, there needs to be an education program, and that's why I'm saying it's part of probably our role as knowledgeable persons to spread that word amongst our friends and families, advising them that, no, it's not a good idea to buy that cheap one from China, because your house might burn down and your insurance may not cover you in that case. So, yep. Okay. Yep. So, what might just, let's see. So this is the non-compliant house battery charger just turning on, and we're looking at around 29 megahertz. So it's a long way up the band. So what I have is a very simple current clamp. Yes, the owners had tested and tagged it, so it's definitely safe. Sorry? For the demo, yes, yeah. I won't leave it turned on for very long, okay? So we hopefully won't void our insurance here tonight. Got a very simple current clamp. It's just a split ferrite, and there's a loop of coax that picks up the signal, just feeding it into the Hermes light. So if I plug it in, you'll see. So that jumps up. That jumped up about 30 dB, and that's not the highest point. And that's at 29 megs as well. So a fair way up the band. So it generates enormous amount of noise, which is what you'd expect for something that's switching. So the rectified DC voltage after the input rectifier is probably somewhere around 320 or 330 volts. And that's being switched at 60 kilohertz as a square wave. And there's nothing stopping it coming back along the mains. So
can you give a bit of a demo of what the actual audio sounds like so people can be familiar with it?
Apparently it's too hard. Can I? No, but I might be able to just. No, I think it's gone out through the HDMI. Oh, yeah, we can do it with that one.
Up to your microphone.
Yeah.
Not a good example.
It sounds a bit different on single sideband, but you get the idea. It's got a lot of 50 hertz modulation in it because of, or 100 hertz because it's rectified AC. All right, just a couple of other things we saw before. Do you want to go full video on me? Okay. So we saw before the mini SA. As I said, super handy, super cheap for a very functional device, and super easy to walk around. Just hold it in your hand and you've got it. Other tools in the EMC or the noise hunting environment. So this is the round probes are magnetic field or H field probes. This one's an E field probe. So the last 25 millimeters or so of that bit of coax has got the outer taken off. And so that it means wherever you're probing it in a circuit or a noise source, it's responding to the electric fields that it sees rather than the magnetic fields. So sometimes they can be different, and it can offer you clues as to if you've got more electric field than magnetic fields. There's sometimes clues there as to what the problem actually is. So for larger areas, the classic large loop, this one's got one of the mini kits active loop preamps in the bottom of it. So again, you can pretty readily determine directionality of a source just by rotating it because the loop has a null. and of course the small class of amateur radio, the FT817 or the IC705, very portable radios, which are also very useful for wandering around because they've got inbuilt batteries, wandering around finding noise sources. All right, thank you. Are there any other questions out there in Zoom land or?
Any questions? Questions?
Yep, there's one.
Test, test.
I just wanted to mention that 80 kilohertz harmonic you were seeing is probably the switching frequency of the transistor and power supply.
It will be the switching frequency, yes, direct switching frequency, yes. I know that class of switching power chip run at those kind of frequencies. So, and it's fairly common. And inside it was a fairly small transformer indicating the frequency of operation is reasonably high. At some point, I'm actually going to try and do a proper EMC conducted emissions test and compare it to the standards. But I need a 240 volt isolation transformer to do that, which I don't have at the moment. So.
One question there. The E field and H field probes that you use, which are excellent, and I've used the commercial ones. Some information on how they're built. Is there a link somewhere we can get that information so we can make a equivalence? I know they're relatively.
I can probably find a reference to them online, which I can I'll get added to it as a link. But
Excellent.
yes, it's very simple. The center conductor at the end there is just soldered to the outer of the conductor here. So it's just a loop like that. And it's not particularly critical. For years in my professional work, I used a set that I'd made out of RG58. It doesn't have to be semi-rigid. It's just handy because it's slightly smaller and easier to work with. But any kind of coaxial cable will work. You probably don't want to use LDF 450, but
yeah, no, thank you.
All right, that's it for me. But Steve, VK5SFA, has a story in a similar vein, as well as helping me with this one, that he, I think, offers some insights as well. Do you want this one? Okay.
Very good. Well, hi everyone. Excellent presentation, Art. That was really good. Just probably a couple more things. I'd like to just explain also the mechanism, how we could hear it all over the eastern suburbs, because this is an important point. So the battery charger obviously was plugged into the 240 volt of a three-phase supply, one on one of the phases. And you might remember earlier in Art's presentation, the cables coming out of the main input box on the street. And of course, then they went underground and then up a Stobie pole, and there was just low tension wires, the characteristic 4 wires, the 3 phases and neutral, and that was heading up McGill Road. And we believe that was just acting as a travelling wave antenna. So that's what was actually propagating the signal back up towards the eastern suburbs, we think. So you have to ask yourself, where is the antenna? The only other thing I'd like to just reiterate on, I'll tell you my story quickly, is just that one of being professional and presentation. It's so important. Just don't rock up there in a flannelette shirt and thongs and boardies and stuff. You've really got to look the part. Because that just instills confidence into the people that you're trying to deal with. It's very important. Probably the last thing I'd say on that, and I agree with Art, I think the ACMA were fantastic, is actually what I want to say. We're all so worried about class licensing and how we're going to be forgotten about, and nothing could be further than the truth, I have to say. They were brilliant. They empowered us, and they empowered us simply by saying that if the party that is potentially causing the interference is uncooperative, we will step in. So when you're suddenly armed with that in your back pocket and you, as Art did, gave them all the information, we over-communicated with them, to be honest, and they were very reasonable people in this instance. Just knowing that if the party is going to be unreasonable, then you don't have to try and butt your head up against the wall. You would just call the ACMA and I think ultimately they would send a radio inspector over and you'd get to where you want to be, albeit it will take a little longer. So have no fear. I can tell you, along with Art, empirical experience proved that out.
Yes. Am I still on? Yep. Just adding to that, acting professionally, and Steve will agree with me. When we actually went to the facility, the contact person we had there just gave us a brief overview of where things were, and then said, "Go for it."
Yeah, they left us alone.
Just let us. So I think that was part of what Steve's saying around looking, respectable and professional, instills a confidence in the people you're dealing with that you know what you're doing and are being helpful.
And in that point too, and we were given that free rein, but we also said to them, look, we are not going to touch any of your equipment. Everything that we are doing here is not destructive in any way. We won't. And we were dealing with, $200,000-$300,000 CT scanners. There were, as the ultrasound machines, many of those, all sorts of things. And as Art alluded to, it was really hard because this building was alive with the interference. It was quite difficult. But again, once we walked past the darn battery charger, it pretty much gave itself up, which was great. And that's, I think, the only time where we actually probably went against our word and actually turned the power off to it, just to prove that in actual fact that the interference was coming from that.
But we did know that wasn't going to affect.
No, we knew that it was just a battery charger.
Any immediate operations.
No, exactly. So it was really good fun, I have to say. It took a while, but I think there was that absolute process, which now will be up on the website, and it's something you can take reference to, and if you need to, enact yourself. So, look, I just want to, in a similar vein, I had a similar experience many, many years ago, again, with a neighbour, and all of a sudden I had, from one day to the next, just noise. There was probably 30 to 40 dB over S9 over the whole HF band. It just appeared all of a sudden. Most disconcerting because where I live is actually pretty quiet. And anyway, very simple investigation, magnetic loop and so on and so forth. I quickly determined by looking at the pattern, and that's probably another thing that we didn't talk about. In the first instance, you need to look for a pattern. Is it on during the day? Is it on during day and night? Is there a certain cadence to the interference? That can really help you. In the case that I'm just about to talk about, it proved very quickly to me, being only nighttime interference, it had to be some sort of luminaire or lighting system, because in the daytime it wasn't there. As soon as dusk came around, sure enough, it would come on. Anyway, I very quickly coincided that. I could actually see my next door neighbour's windows and watching very carefully on the spectral display. And as soon as the lights came on, then interference started. So pretty much worked out where it was coming from. So I rang the ACMA. We were not under class licensing at that time. It was apparatus license, but it was the same thing. They said, look, we would like you in the first instance to just make contact with your neighbour and see if you can work it out. Just let them know that you have a proper apparatus license and are actually entitled to some protections. And if you have problems, come back to us. So I approached my neighbour. It was a Sunday morning, went there and introduced myself. He had met me before. He's a bottom neighbour, so it's not such a neighbour that I would see all that often. Explained who I was, what it was affecting that in my hobby. He was concerned it was some sort of commercial thing that I was doing, which I assured him it wasn't. Explained to him who the ACMA were, what protections that I had, and there was something interfering with me. And I said to him that I think it may be your lighting system. Anyway, he said, look, I just need to take this all on board. And I said, I'll leave you do that. And I wrote out a little information card for him, how to find the ACMA website and their phone numbers and so on and so forth. In credit to him, intelligent man, he did his due diligence. He rang them. They gave him the same story and said, look, you have to cooperate. So he came back to me and said, look, let's do some tests. The simple test was, whilst I was looking at the spectrum display on the phone to him, I just said, turn off all your lights. And as soon as he turned it back on, off, we'd synchronized. So we knew that was the issue. And he was a little flummoxed in that he said, look, I just replaced all my lights, about a month ago, and I bought them off eBay and they work perfectly. They're great, they make beautiful light. I said, and tell me, did they come from China? And of course, I had to be a little careful because there's this family of Chinese extraction. So he said, oh, yeah, no, I got them off AliExpress or whatever. And I said, yeah, well, look, I think the problem will be that the lights, whilst they function perfectly as a luminaire, they create all sorts of interference. So at any rate, I put a value on my hobby. This is just another piece of my advice that you can digest and take it or leave it. But you look at how much money you spend on your radios and your antenna systems and your towers and all your equipment and all that and so on and so forth. And I put a value on that, and I felt that I would get to where I needed to go a little more easily if I said to the neighbour, look, it's not your fault. It's just not your fault. We shouldn't let these things into the country, but we do. You bought them because they were the cheapest price. I totally understand it. That makes perfect sense to me. But unbeknownst to you, they create interference. I said, I'm very happy to go halves in the cost of the remedy, provided I can have some input on what new luminaires that you buy. And he was perfectly okay with it. He thought that was a great deal. And so we did. But I got to choose the light that he was happy with aesthetically, but I was happy with electrically. So we bought from an Australian distributor and they had all the proper approvals and so on and so forth. But I did say we needed to buy a test one, which I would buy at my expense, so I could put it on the bench and actually test it to make sure it is quiet from an RF point of view, which I did. Flying colours, you wouldn't know if the light was on or off. So they were, I think they were Mirabellas, maybe. I think I can find that out, but it was in actual fact, I got them from Bunnings because they were having a run out on this particular model, but it just meant that they were fully compliant and we got them relatively cheaply. So anyway, so it cost me $500, but $500 for come back to RF quiet, so that's the value that ultimately I put on my hobby. Here's the kicker, and this is going to make you laugh. So back then, all the homes in our area for internet were VDSL over the telephone line. Where I live, the telephone line is underground back to the pit into the street. Where he lives, it goes up outside aerially to a Stobie pole and then across the road and then down into a pit. And in the middle of all of this, when he was not so convinced, I said, tell me something, do you at night time, does your internet start to slow down? He went, well, yeah, actually it does, when the sun goes down. I said, yeah, right. I said, do me a little favour. He said, oh, my daughter goes off her nut. She's trying to do things and the like, and it just slows down to a crawl. I said, do me a favour. When it starts to go slow, switch off all your lights. And he switched off all the lights and it went back to 100 megabits a second from 5. That really got me over the line. So just keep your knowledge, keep your radar, keep your ears on, just make sure you understand what's going on. But the net result is you get more with sugar, be honest, be upfront, be factual. Everything that Art said applies, and I'm pretty sure that you'd have success. Thank you very much.